And welcome everybody to Chalk Talk. I am your host, Kim Davis. Today is Tuesday, May the 11th. I cannot believe it's May 11th. It is the third full week of May, or the second full week of May. At any rate, it's May the 11th, and welcome to Chalk Talk. I am glad to have you guys with me today. I am going to let you hear some interviews that I played, that I shared a little bit on my social media pages. And to let you, if I can get those for you. Anyway, I am having a few challenges getting those to you, but we'll make it happen. Yesterday was the Houston Texans annual golf classic. It's the 18th year, and they have this golf tournament that raises money for the Texans Foundation. One of the big recipients is the Boys and Girls Club. And so they've been doing this every year. Yesterday, I don't know what the final number was, but the thought was that they would raise $350,000 for charity on yesterday. So it's something that they do every year. It started years ago with Texans owner, Bob McNair. That was something that was really important to him and something that they did. So let's see here. Where am I? More than one way to skin a cat. I'm trying to bring these other videos to you. And I figured out how I can do it. So at any rate, that was yesterday. Cal McNair met with the media beforehand, as did General Manager Nick Caserio, and then the new team president, Greg Grisham. So they all talked a little bit about just, expectations and that sort of thing. What the tournament is for, just the early stages of how things are going really in this new administration, because it is, in fact, a new administration. There's so much, the organization, the roster, if you look at it, has changed over. At least 50% of it is new. It's different. And then on the business side, for the first time since the organization's inception, since it launched back in 2000, or maybe probably before that, there's a new team president. Jamie Roots had been the president of the organization since the beginning of the franchise. And now Greg Grisham, who's been a part of the organization, but he is now the team president. And so, he talked about how things are going. The season ticket sales apparently are going well. There's a lot of interest. And as he said, their goal is to sell out every day. So there's a lot happening in the Texans organization, and things are apparently going well. Good morning, Ellen Davis Johnson. It's my sister. And welcome. Thank you for being a part of Chalk Talk. Tell Angel I said hello. For those of you who have been asking where Angel is on Tuesday, she's often at, she used to always go out and hang out with my mom a couple days a week. And even though my mom is not here, she still is with the family. So she's with my sister Ellen and my brother Lewis. She's over bossing them around, telling them what to do, how to be. And so I'll get her back probably tomorrow afternoon. It's really funny, this whole thing with Angel, right? So listen, I am going to let you hear from Nick Caserio and Cal McNair during today's show. And I mentioned a big announcement. And so I'm going to share some things that we're going to be adding to what we do here on Chalk Talk. And, looking back really over my time covering sports, it's been quite a journey. It continues to be a journey, right? If I look back from the very first time I covered a post-game interview or an event. And so I'm going to bring some of those people to the show and let you hear from some of the people who have been a part of just this fabric of sports in Houston over the past several decades. And really some of the big stories, whether they were in Houston or not, but let you hear from Houstonians about how those sporting events impacted them, or where they were, what they were doing during some of those times. And I was reminded of one of those events recently. Do you remember it was 1994, and the Houston Rockets were playing the New York Knicks in the NBA Finals. It was game 6 at Madison Square Garden. I was at that game, covering that game in New York City. And that was the day of the OJ Bronco chase, right? So there's this, not even a split screen, but there's this picture in picture of that event happening. So people in Houston were not super excited about seeing the chase, but that was such a big deal, right? That was such a major story. But the NBA Finals was going on, and so the network, and I believe at the time it was NBC that had the NBA contract, had a picture in picture, and so many of us would go down to the press room, and we were huddled around this television, and we're watching this as it unfolds while we're still covering the game 6 of the NBA Finals, right? It was just, I mean, so it's those kinds of stories. Of course, the Rockets won that series in game 7 back on their home court. I believe that was game 6. I believe that was game 6, and then we came back to Houston for game 7. But, you know, it's that. That was 1994. It was the Houston Astros playing the Los Angeles Dodgers in the Astrodome in a 22-inning game, right? And some of us got after that game said, I survived the Astros Dodgers 22-inning game. It was a Saturday night game, which means on Sunday, you know, the Sunday games always start earlier, unless it's like now night game for TV. Those Sunday games started at 1 o'clock. So I don't think I left the Astrodome until 1 or 2 in the morning. I don't even remember, but you know, there weren't that many people left in the stadium. Those of us who were working and covering the game, of course, had to be there. And one of the funny things is, you know, getting your stories posted back then, it's very different from doing it now, right? You had to plug in through a phone line, and you had to upload to get your story posted. You know, newspapers had deadlines in terms of when they had to go to print, because we didn't have all this digital online network stuff that we have now. And so at some point, the paper has to be printed, and they can't keep holding it for the end of this game. So there are just some really cool stories over the course of my career that I've been thinking about, and that I want to share with you guys along the way. And those are just a couple of them. There was a Buffalo Bills game with the Houston Oilers when they blew that huge lead. The game was in Buffalo. And it has been kind of a staple, if you will, for much of, okay, let's do this. I'm sorry, I was sharing a video and it kind of caught my eye that it was doing something on its own. But there are all those kinds of stories that we're going to talk about that are a part of the announcement that we're going to, I'm going to share with you later in the show. But in the meantime, I do also want to give a update. Okay, so really, Reggie Clark, here's my dear friend Reggie Clark, who's a Buffalo Bills fan. He said it was blacked out in Buffalo. He had to go to Canada to watch it. You're a Buffalo Bills fan, so your memory of that game is much different than those of us who were either covering the game or Houston Oilers fans. It was a dark day in sports for those of us covering that game and talking about it. The 100-mile, that's right. Back then, that's another thing. There used to be this 100-mile blackout. That's because the Bills game didn't even sell out. If it didn't sell out by noon on Friday, then the game was blacked out for the local market within a 100-mile radius of the stadium. So if you're right, it was a 100-mile blackout. And of course, he says, go Bills. That collapse was pretty major. In fact, when I was working, one of the times I lived out of the market and I was covering sports in New Orleans, the Saints and the Saints and the Rams were involved in the game, to where throughout the game, the broadcasters were saying, this could be a collapse, that may rival the biggest collapse in NFL history. They kept referring to Oilers and Bills collapse. So that was one of the things that was one of the things that pops up, in this vast history I have had covering just some of the biggest sports stories, not just in Houston, but around the country. And so, good morning, Sylvia. Welcome, welcome, my other sister. And she's got her profile picture is a picture of our mom. So happy Mother's Day again to all of those who I didn't get a chance to wish Mother's Day wishes to over the weekend. Those of you who are moms or godmothers, or you in some way are mothering somebody. We all appreciate you. You are necessary and you're really very important. So thank you for mothering on somebody, right? Because everybody needs a little bit of that. Let me see if I can find this. A couple of these things I told you I would share from yesterday. These interviews, like the Cal McNair interview and the Nick Caserio interview. It was, nothing terribly revealing. It's just that you don't get an opportunity very often to talk with the owner of the Texans. He is not as, I don't want to say available, but it's just not really what he does. And very often, or Nick Caserio, who is the new general manager, we'll talk to him. So let's see here. Let me let you hear from Nick Caserio for starters. We'll make him the big screen. So the question yesterday that he was answering was about quarterback David Mills. Are you excited to see him at rookie camp? Because that's coming up this weekend. And as he said, he's cautioning you on putting really too much emphasis on what could possibly happen with one throw. Right? He's saying, hey, look, don't get too caught up in all of that. Let's see here. I'm trying to navigate a little something for you guys and show you, making sure okay. So they're there. It's coming. So I can show you the other interviews with that you hear from Cal McNair as well, and some more from Nick Caserio. So, okay. So let me do this. I had a late kind of technical glitch, but there is more than one way to skin a cat, right? So we'll do that. Okay, so I'm going to let you hear now from Cal McNair. Hang on one second. Okay. So here's Cal McNair talking about just all the changes in the organization. And then I also asked him a question. CEO Cal McNair talking about just the chemistry in the organization with all the new changes and what his expectations are. So, there's been a lot of talk this offseason where people seem to be upset about what was happening with the Texans organization in terms of the direction. And according to Cal McNair and also Greg Grisham, who is the new team president, things are going well. There's excitement, they say, about season tickets. And so they are proceeding as though they will be operating at full capacity in terms of the stands and the stadium, being able to allow fans in. So we'll see what happens. If in fact that is the direction that it goes, we will, we'll find out about that. I mean, time will definitely tell. Let's see here. I'm going to also let you hear
just giving them
more from Nick Caserio talking about what he expects as well. You've got rookie camp coming up this weekend, a rookie mini camp, and then there's going to be a mini camp next month. They're OTAs. They're about to start phase 2. They're phasing it back in. They being, when I say they, I mean the NFL, in terms of how teams are allowed to practice and move forward. So the Texans are doing the very same thing, and they are communicating according to what the teams allow, what the league allows them to do. And so here is Texans general manager Nick Caserio. And I think he's talking here about what he expects from, after dealing with the changes, and what he expects to see from rookie mini camp. Let's hear from Texans general manager Nick Caserio.
The big thing is, just more than anything, just giving them a foundation about our program and what the expectation is. Because the reality is, a lot of these guys have been essentially independent contractors for 6 months, maybe even longer, depending upon whether or not they played during the fall season, right, John? So, okay, fast forward to January, combine training, whatever the combine was, pro day, like they've kind of been on their own. Okay, not everybody knows where they're going. It's not a draft. This mock draft has
So Nick Caserio, and if any of you are wondering, there was a brief question about Deshaun Watson. There's no real big point in asking those questions, because the Texans have made it clear, and at this point, understandably, that until whatever the legal situation is resolved and the league weighs in, there's really nothing for them to say. So they're moving forward with planning for the season, and we'll see what happens. For those of you who ask me, I don't expect that Deshaun Watson will ever be in a Houston Texan uniform again. I don't know where he'll end up. I think he will end up someplace. The question is whether he will get to play in 2021. Will there be a suspension? All of those are questions that are outstanding, and we just don't really have the answer to. If you're a Texan fan and you're still hanging in there despite just the offseason that's been crazy. I mean, Nick Caserio has completely turned over the roster. As we talked about the draft a little bit last week, there were many of you thought that they should have done more to shore up the defense. The truth is, this team is in rebuild mode, and they're not going to be good for a bit, right? They're not going to be very good for a while. It's one thing to say we go out and we try to win every game. Of course you do. But they are, their whole identity is changing. And as Cal McNair said in one of the earlier clips, they haven't done that sort of a changeover, if you will, before. And so maybe that's what they need. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Good morning, Kim Edwards-Williams, my Taurus friend. Happy birthday again to her. I got a chance to celebrate with her a little bit last week. So always glad to see her in the building for Chalk Talk. And speaking of birthdays, today is my friend Niles Dillard's birthday. Niles is the owner of Superior Superior Video Services. Anything to do with production, photos, video. I work with Niles on that a lot. And so we were doing a site visit on a project we're working on yesterday. So I didn't even realize it was his birthday today. So I'm glad that I took him some homemade treats from the weekend. We'll just call it pre-birthday stuff. So yay, Niles, right? Super excited to be working with him on a project. All right, so here's some of the other things that I'm going to be telling you about or sharing with you throughout Chalk Talk moving forward. Some of the other things that have happened, when I look back, over my career, when I covered the Houston Oilers, I mean, think about this. Back then, we could actually be on the sidelines during practice. Now you can, before COVID, you could go for like the beginning kind of warm up of practice. And now but back then we were there like for the entire practice. So I remember the day that the announcement came out that Magic Johnson was HIV positive and how it sent shockwaves through the sports world, and being on the sidelines of practice at the Houston Oilers facility, which is right down on Holly Hall, and just seeing the reaction of players with that announcement, right? It just really changed so much in sports. I mean, that was really early on in the epidemic. And you think about where the conversation around HIV and AIDS has come. I actually did a lot of work in that space. I sat on the board of the Houston AIDS Foundation for several years and attended a church that was really active and is still active in terms of testing and providing resources for people who are HIV positive. And so I think about, man, what day was that? I don't even remember the year. I'll have to look it up. But it was pretty significant, right? It was a pretty spectacular day, just being there on the sidelines, taking all of it in. I mean, remember, back then there was no, there was internet, but there was no social media. We weren't getting news updates on our phones up to the minute, right? So news didn't travel the same way. And I don't know where you were when that announcement came out, but I just think about the announcement and how it really struck. It was 1991. That was the day. It was 1991 when he basically stunned the world by announcing his sudden. He also retired, right? Immediately retired after testing positive for HIV, the virus that causes AIDS. That was in 1991. So, you think about that. That was a different kind of a big day in sports, but it was a really big day in sports. Reggie says, treats. These aren't dog treats. These are really good treats. So I'll tell you what they were for the weekend. Some of the stuff I cooked, I made these greens, and of course I make them without any meat. It had a little kick to them, but they're really very tasty. In fact, Niles was like, "Those greens didn't have meat in them?" I'm like, nope, there was no meat. And he loved them just the same. I also made a strawberry crumble, which is pretty tasty, and this chocolate kind of a cookie thing that I made in a cast iron skillet that you put in the oven. All of it was vegan, and it was also gluten free. It was really good. So it was a little bit of a treat for the weekend, and I shared that with Ray Neese yesterday and also with Niles. Oh, I have an update. So last week, or was it 2 weeks ago, we had an opportunity for 4 Chalk Talk viewers to, Sylvia. One of my meat eaters, my sister Sylvia, said the greens were awesome. Thank you. They were. They were awesome. In fact, when I get done with Chalk Talk today, I'm going to have some for lunch. We had an opportunity a few weeks ago to give away some tickets to 2 Chalk Talk viewers, and it was supposed to be 1, but I didn't manage it real well because I didn't have a plan for it. My dear friend Keisha with the Houston Astros hopped on and say, "Here's 4 tickets to 4 tickets to give away to one of your Chalk Talk supporters," and so I didn't have a real good system. Well, so that was her fault. But we rectified it because I kind of had 2 people at once that said, "Hey, I want him. So I will tell you that Charles Lamar Drayton, our legal expert for Chalk Talk, won one of the packages of 4 tickets, and Raynice Edwards, Outside In Consulting, won the other 4-pack. The tickets, so I've connected them with Keisha. They're planning out what games they'll go to. I asked them to let me know because I'll come by and say hello to them at those games. They're going to be great seats above the dugouts, either along the third baseline or the first baseline. So they're good seats. And she's giving 8 tickets away. The Astros are giving 8 tickets to Chalk Talk. So I feel confident. I see you, Reggie Clark. I feel confident that we will have another giveaway soon. That's one of the benefits of being a part of the Chalk Talk family, is that we got good stuff going on. And, you hear me talk about the Astros. Now, we will probably, I don't know that we'll ever have any Texans tickets to give you. But the Astros, we will have some more Astros tickets for you. And I feel optimistic about the Astros' future. And, I'm a big supporter of Dusty Baker. Like I've liked him and followed him as a manager before he ever came to Houston. So it's good to have him there. I think he's the right person for this organization, and I look forward to seeing him bring this team kind of to the next level. I'm hoping that they can take the step and get back to postseason and make some noise. And it would be great to see them win another World Series and to give Dusty Baker his first World Series title as a manager. I'd be super excited for that to happen in 2021. Okay, so anything is possible, right? Some of the other things. Hey, there's one of our Chalk Talk Astro Packet winners, Charles Lamar Drayton. Good morning, my friend. Our legal expert, who I'll have to get back on pretty soon to talk about, some other legal things, not just in the world of sports, but in general. I have some questions, so we'll have to get him back on the show. He is a wealth of information. So one of the other things is, I don't know how many of you remember the Rockets teams that had Lewis Lloyd on it. What was the other guy? The point guard, Alan Level. It was Wiggins, who was a forward. Charles says he remembers those. So I was an intern, right? I was in college and I was an intern. And so my very first time doing post game in the locker room, and I interned at Channel 11 with Matt Musil, who is still actually working at Channel 11 today. So when I do stuff on Channel 11 on their Sports Extra show with Jason and Daniel, but then also with Matt, it's really cool because I was an intern so Matt has seen my career like come full circle, right? But my first time going in to do post game. So back then it was in the old Summit, which is now Lakewood, and where the locker room was, where you would go do interviews, like to go to interview the coach, you had to walk past the shower to get to back where the interview was. I mean, like, it's not like what we see today, And so I remember back then the question was always about women in the locker room and how do you feel about that? And, why do you get to go in the locker room? And I always laugh when I heard those questions because I, quite frankly, think they were kind of ridiculous. Why do I get to go in the locker room? So let me just tell you what the locker room was like back then. It's better now because it's bigger, but still, I would rather not have to work in a locker room just because people taking off their nasty, dirty, smelly clothes and throwing them around. But that's where I had to do work, right? So the question wasn't about should women be in a locker room. It was about equal access. So if the locker room was where the interviews were taking place, then everybody who's credentialed to cover these games, to cover these entities, had to have the same access, right? So there are some women's sports that didn't allow reporters in the locker room. They didn't allow women. They didn't allow men. So again, it was about equal access, but I digress. So I'm walking past the shower to, with the photographer. We're going to interview the coach, and I hear somebody say, "Watch out." So I stop. And Louis Lloyd, because, I guess men can do this. He's like peeing across the shower to make it hit the wall. Now I don't think he was trying to hit me. I don't really know what made a grown man do that, period. But that was my first time in the locker room. And I was like, really? So for everybody who thinks it's some really groovy place to be, it is not. Now, that behavior does not happen today. You do not even get to go near the showers. I mean, it's a whole different setup, but just from what it used to be, it has come a long way in terms of just the facility itself. In fact, I was sharing this with a friend the other day. At the Oilers facility, right, where we used to stay out and watch the entire practice. So everything, you got to watch it from beginning to end. And there was no media space at that facility. Now, before they closed, they did build a little media room in the front, and it had a restroom. But initially, there was no media space at the practice facility. So if I'm covering practice and I got to go to the restroom, I got to go into the locker room and use their restroom. So I'd have to have, somebody come with me to kind of like stand outside while I go into the men's room to use the restroom. So I got like this journey of getting to this place and beyond has been really interesting. And so those are some of the stories that I want to share with you, because I just have really glossed over them. I mean, it's just been a part of the journey, and I've never really thought about how the stories themselves are a part of the fabric of not just what I do, but sports in this market. And so we're going to talk about those in a special segment, right? We're going to talk about those in a special segment. The segment is going to be back in the day, and I'm going to invite former athletes on to talk about some of these big moments. And of course, the big moment is not Louis Lloyd peeing across the shower, but it is the twin towers of Akeem Olajuwon and Ralph Sampson, right? It is the two NBA championships the Rockets won in 94 and 95. And for those of you who think the Rockets wouldn't have won them if Michael Jordan was still playing, we could debate that all day long. But all I know is they won the championships and they have two titles, and I covered them both. I was on the road for both of them, and I covered the ones when they beat the Knicks in that first year in 94. And then they actually swept the Orlando Magic in 95. They were, the Magic had were the favorites to win that series. The Rockets were the underdog. We started that series in Orlando. The Rockets won those two games in Orlando. We came back to Houston, and they sewed it up and won the final two. And so they had back-to-back titles. That was 94 and 95. And back then there was still this entity called the Houston Post. So I did work for the Houston Post. And so many of you, some of you who are younger or new to the market, you never experienced the Houston Post, because now we are basically a one newspaper town other than weeklies and online publications. But in terms of a daily publication, there is only the Houston Chronicle. And we will see, how long, what the future is for that organization as they are making adjustments. But all of that is a part of the fabric of Houston sports, and not even just sports, because sports is such a big part of the fabric of a community, right? So it becomes a part of the landscape of a city, and in terms of giving the city its some of its identity. So if you think about when the Houston Oilers left and went to Tennessee, and that period of time that Houston was without an NFL team, the Oilers left. I guess it was 96, and so did I. I moved to Illinois and did TV there for a while, and then came back and then went to New Orleans and did TV for a while. But I was here when Houston was awarded the Texans. In fact, I remember covering the owners' meetings in Atlanta. It was during the postseason for baseball, so the Astros were playing the Braves across town, and the owners were meeting in a hotel, and we were waiting kind of on pins and needles to see if they were going to vote to award Bob McNair in Houston this franchise. And I will tell you that the NFL really wanted to give that franchise in Los Angeles. Los Angeles, being the second largest TV market, but LA was like, yeah, whatever, you can give it to us, but we're not doing anything extra. Meanwhile, Bob McNair was like, hey, we're gonna guarantee sellouts for the first 5 years. And so in a league that has true revenue sharing, that was a big deal. Like, we're going to guarantee sellouts, and all these things that they were going to provide. It was very difficult for the league to not give the franchise to Houston. So being there, that was a huge moment in Houston sports history. And covering that in Atlanta was pretty exciting, as we were all sitting around for hours outside those ballrooms on the floor, waiting to get word on what the NFL's decision was. So all of that is a part of what we'll talk about, what I'll share, and some of the people that I'm going to have come and help tell these stories. People that may have nothing to do with sports, but can bring some perspective in terms of what they were doing, where they were in some of these big sports moments. Charles says, my apologies for the nonsense men that put women through. I remember those days and the ridiculous arguments made to defend it. I know, right? It was really something. And so when I see a lot of women today cover sports, hats off to them who never had to go through those days. But some of them have this sense of almost arrogance and kind of entitlement, like they should almost like, well, why are you here? I mean, who do you work for? I work for the KD company. That's who I work for. And I'm like, many of them don't realize that it was people like me who really helped pave the way for them to be able to do what they do in the environment that they're able to do it today. So I'm glad to have been a part of that and a part of that history, which is why I am excited to announce the Back in the Day segment. But the Back in the Day segment is really going to underscore what I'm moving into, right? So I'm not leaving. We're still going to have Chalk Talk. We're still going to expand Chalk Talk. There's still another announcement coming. But moving forward, it'll be Chalk Talk with Kim Davis, Houston's first woman of sports, right? Like, who better to be the Houston's first woman of sports than somebody who's been a part of 3 decades of sports in this market and continues to be, and can bring you a perspective on some of the greatest moments in sports over the last 3 decades. Now, remember, if you're doing the math, right? I started when I was 12. So stop trying to figure out the whole, age thing. I started when I was 12, right? I'm some sort of what do you call that person? I'm not an anomaly, but I'm a phenom. That's what I am. I was a phenom. Thank you, Charles. Yes. So it's going to be, we have a whole tagline. I'm going to create a whole graphic. And so it's Chalk Talk with Kim Davis, Houston's first woman of sports. And I'm leaning into that so that you can hear some of the rich history of just the experiences and just the stories that I've been a part of and that I've witnessed and that I've actually helped to tell. And I want to remind people of those stories and bring some perspective to what was happening during those times. What was happening when the Astros played their last game at the Astrodome? Do you remember that Minute Maid Park was called Enron Field? I remember doing a stand-up, right, at Enron Field when it was still Enron Field. And a stand-up is when you see the reporter or anchor on camera. It's like a bridge. You see them. And so we were doing this story. Joel Mathiasen, who works at Fox now, was my videographer. And the story was because there were so many home runs that were hit over the Crawford Street boxes. And so they used to call it Home Run Field. So we had to shoot this story, and the goal was for we were there doing batting practice. And so my back is to the field because he's got to shoot the field. And the point was for me to do this stand up and for him to shoot me doing the stand up and follow a home run being hit. Right. So it was one of those, they used to call me one hit wonders. Like I could do a stand up in one take wonders. So to time it to where they're about to pitch the ball and when they're swinging the bat. So I do my stand up and then whenever the ball, actually was a home run, that's the one that was a keeper. I mean, those were fun times. It was Enron Field. They called it Home Run Field until the collapse, of course, of Enron. And then it had no name for a minute. It was just the Park at Union Station, I believe is what they called it, until Minute Maid bought the naming rights, right? Do you remember that? The Houston had to change the name of its baseball stadium because of the Enron collapse, which was far bigger than baseball or sports. It was a huge collapse for the entire market. So, hey, Carolyn, I'm glad that you're excited to be a part of this too. So as we build on the excitement and we build on these stories, I need you guys to keep showing up and to bring people with you. So it really gives some, I don't want to say value or some excitement to these stories and this history, and then we still talk about what's happening today. I mean, we're going to still talk about what's happening with the Texans and the Astros and the Rockets and some of the universities and the fact that Shaquille O'Neal's son is playing at Texas Southern University. All that's exciting, right? I'm still working to get basketball coach Johnny Jones on, but all of those things are exciting. And so from the fabric of this city and what sports does, one of the things sports provides, what it offers is common ground, right? So when I'm talking to people about leadership or communications, or even a little bit of diversity, or inclusion, really more than equity, really more than diversity. Diversity is that check the box thing, and I'm excited to have my friend, the diversity dude, join us one day soon when his schedule permits to share some of his thoughts. He works in that space all the time, but my background in sports really instructs a lot of what I do. And it's because it comes from studying and writing and covering about common ground. And the biggest arena for common ground is sports. So I'm excited that you guys are part of it. I'm glad that you're here for the announcement today. And the next time that when you come in and when you hear me talk about Chalk Talk, I'm going to always say, hey, welcome to Chalk Talk. I'm Kim Davis, Houston's first woman of sports. And so you can feel free to share that and refer to me in that light as well. Charles says, my firm was one of the ones representing. Oh, wow. You represented the Astros on the stadium deal. See, I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't mentioned that story. So we'll have to get Charles to come in because I would love to have a conversation about what those stadium deals look like. See, we have a wealth of knowledge on Chalk Talk. That's just why he's our legal expert. But let's talk about that. I'd love to know whatever you can share about how those deals are done from a legal aspect, because I don't, most of us don't know. I know how they're done from the sports side and what it means, but what really goes into a stadium deal? And so you're talking about probably the deal when they built the stadium, I'm imagining, instead of necessarily the naming rights, because there's naming rights, and then there are the deals that build the stadium, right? So how does it work with the public money and the private money and the bonds, and what is it that the stadium is supposed to, or the Astros, what were they supposed to do as a part of that deal? There was a certain amount of money that had to be committed, that was supposed to be committed to MWBE, minority women in business owners, in terms of getting a part of the revenue, because there's a lot that goes into building a stadium. I think those are really cool stories that we don't always talk about, and we hear about them at the beginning and then we don't talk about them anymore. But let's talk about what went into it, and then let's talk about what's happening now. Are there still companies? Are there minority and women-owned businesses that are making money on from those stadiums? Because they're ongoing contracts, right? We know that they all have these many of them, at least the local ones, have a deal with Aramark. Aramark almost has a monopoly in Houston stadiums. But where are the opportunities for other business owners, for vendors, all that stuff are things we're going to talk about. So with that said, I'm going to wrap up for today. As always, it's super exciting for you to, for me to share here on Chalk Talk. I'm excited about telling these stories and bringing you some of these guests as Houston's first woman in sports, and for you to share these guests, share these stories, and share the show with your community. So thank you in advance. It's going to be a lot of fun. I think whenever you bring some new meaning or kind of a new purpose to what you do, it creates another level of excitement. So thank you for that. And I've had, as recently as yesterday, I had a friend say, "Where is the Chalk Talk cookbook coming from? When is that? Have you started it?" And so, yeah, all that's going to happen. I said, well, maybe it should be Sports Bites. She goes, no, it's Chalk Talk, and it should be a cookbook with your anecdote. So all that's going to be happening, and it's going to be happening with Kim Davis, Houston's first woman of sports. So thank you all. I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Ellen Davis Johnson. I'm so glad you enjoyed it. I appreciate you as always for being here. Tell Angel hello. And listen, remember, do something kind for yourself and do something kind for somebody else. If you have not gotten the vaccine, I'm encouraging you to do so that we can get closer to reaching herd immunity. If you've got young people, I think you should talk with your doctors, but get them vaccinated. I think that would be super important as we, try to move back to some sense of whatever the new normalcy is going to be. And remember to also still wear your mask. I am completely vaccinated. I wear my mask. I practice social distancing. I'm gonna be honest, I'm not really spending time with a whole lot of folk who have not gotten the vaccine. Nothing personal. I'm just saying. So I look forward to you guys. Hey, Raynice, one of our winners of Astros tickets. Raynice says, I love it. Houston's first woman in sports. Absolutely. So I'm leaning into that. You guys take good care of yourself. I'll see you back here next Tuesday. Follow me on social media, on Twitter and Instagram. I'll give you updates if things break and happen throughout the week. But have a great week. Make sure you share the video, and I will